Let's start our first news with a major statement from Dana White about Islam Makhachev and his place among the greatest fighters in UFC history. After Islam's upcoming showdown with Garry, the conversation around his legacy could become even bigger. Dana White was recently asked about Islam's status as a potential pound-for-pound GOAT, and his response made one thing very clear. He believes Islam is absolutely on the right path. Dana explained that he doesn't like making those kinds of judgments before a fight happens. Instead, he wants to see how Islam performs and what happens inside the Octagon before deciding where he belongs on the all-time list. According to Dana, Islam's continued success is what could ultimately separate him from the rest. If he keeps fighting, keeps winning, and continues breaking records, his legacy will become impossible to ignore. Dana pointed out that Islam has been putting his head down, grinding through opponents, and consistently performing at an elite level. The more victories he adds, the stronger his case becomes. But Dana also believes the final judgment should come later. He wants to see what Islam does against Garry and how the fight plays out. If Islam delivers another dominant performance and continues his incredible run, the discussion about his place among the greatest of all time could become much more serious. Dana essentially said that Islam has all the tools needed to become the guy when it comes to the GOAT conversation. The talent, consistency, championship success, and ability to keep winning are already there. Now, it could come down to how much longer Islam wants to compete and what else he accomplishes before eventually walking away from the sport. And there is another interesting part to this story. Khabib recently shared a video on social media, adding even more attention to Islam's current run and the legacy surrounding him. For now, Dana White isn't ready to officially crown Islam as the greatest of all time. But his message is clear. Islam Makhachev is already moving in that direction, and every major victory from this point forward could make his GOAT case even stronger. Move on to another news, and this time, Garry is revealing a potentially important part of his strategy against Islam Makhachev. Some fans believe could need a miracle to defeat Islam at UFC 330, especially if Islam manages to take the fight to the ground. But what if and his team have found a way to limit Islam's movement before he can establish his takedown game? In a recent interview with Full Send, was asked about Islam getting him into his infamous front headlock position. Sounded extremely confident that it simply won't happen. He explained that he has been preparing for every position in training and believes he can prevent Islam from controlling him in that dangerous position. But then, revealed something even more interesting. He suggested using oblique kicks to maintain distance and potentially damage Islam's knee. Was even asked whether he could land more than 20 of those kicks during the fight, and he confidently leaned toward the over. That could be a significant part of his strategy. The idea would be to use the kicks to disrupt Islam's movement, keep him at range, and potentially make his takedown attempts more difficult. If Islam cannot move freely, his ability to close the distance and establish his wrestling could be affected. Also joked about adding a jumping side kick similar to the technique John Jones has used in the past. Of course, landing repeated oblique kicks against an elite fighter is easier said than done. Islam has faced dangerous strikers before, and his ability to adapt inside the Octagon is one of his biggest strengths. Still, clearly believes this approach can make a difference. And if he can damage Islam's mobility early while maintaining distance, it could completely change the dynamics of the fight and force Islam to adjust his entire game plan. Move on to another news, and this time, Garry is speaking openly about his altercation with Khamzat and explaining exactly how he believes the situation unfolded. Made it clear that he doesn't believe he did anything wrong and said he was simply showing respect when the incident happened. According to he was around Arman and his team after a fight. He congratulated Arman and several members of the team, but accidentally left Khamzat out because he didn't notice him at first. Explained that once he realized it, he approached Khamzat and apologized, asking how he was. At that moment, claims everything was completely fine between them. However, according to the situation only became tense after someone stepped between the two fighters. Ian also addressed the idea that Khamzat could have seriously hurt him if he wanted to. He argued that if Khamzat genuinely believed Ian was being aggressive, he could have reacted immediately. Instead, Ian insists his body language showed the opposite. He explained that walking up to someone, shaking their hand, and saying hello is not an aggressive gesture. In his view, there was no malicious intent behind what he did. Ian also pushed back against the idea that he was deliberately trying to provoke Khamzat. He said that if his intention had been to start a fight or poke the bear, he would have done something much more obvious, such as slapping him. But that didn't happen. Instead, Ian says he simply shook Khamzat's hand and moved on. He also made it clear that the incident hasn't kept him awake at night. From Ian's perspective, the situation happened, emotions escalated, and now he's simply focused on what comes next. With the attention now shifting back toward Islam, Makhachev and his upcoming fight, Ian appears determined to leave the confrontation behind and concentrate fully on the biggest challenge of his career. Move on to another news, and this time, the tension between Merab and Umar Nurmagomedov appears to be escalating after an altercation involving one of Umar's friends. As Merab prepares for his trilogy fight against Peter Yan, he has also been staying active with RAF events. During one of those events in Georgia, Merab reportedly got into an altercation with a friend of Umar. The situation attracted attention because it was connected to comments Merab had previously made about Umar. According to the discussion surrounding the incident, Umar's friend was unhappy with the way Merab responded when asked about him. Merab allegedly called Umar spoiled, and the exchange eventually became heated. Now, Umar has publicly addressed what happened, and his comments suggest that he strongly disapproves of the confrontation. While speaking with Adam Zubay, Umar explained that he could not imagine himself behaving the way the incident reportedly unfolded. He questioned how someone could live with themselves after attacking or insulting another person, particularly if the situation involved hitting someone from behind. Umar also criticized people who defend behavior he believes is clearly wrong. His message was straightforward: wrong is wrong, regardless of who is responsible. Umar then explained his understanding of what happened. He said that Akma approached Merab and questioned why he was speaking on behalf of someone who wasn't even present. According to Umar, Akma did not insult Merab or intentionally disrespect him. Instead, Umar said Akma simply told him to say whatever he wanted directly to the person's face and questioned why he was swearing during the conversation. Those comments did not go unnoticed. Merab has now seen Umar's reaction, and instead of ignoring it, he fired back with a lengthy 3-minute video on social media. That response has added another layer to an already heated situation. What initially looked like an isolated confrontation at an RF event has now turned into a public back and forth involving two fighters who already have plenty of history between them. With Merab preparing for another major fight and Umar continuing to speak openly about the incident, the situation is clearly not disappearing anytime soon. Move on to another news, and this time we have a breaking update involving the UFC 330 main card. A fight has been changed at the last minute after Jose Oa was reportedly forced to withdraw from his scheduled matchup against Charles Johnson because of an injury. However, Charles Johnson is not leaving the card. Instead, the UFC has found a replacement opponent, meaning Johnson will still get the opportunity to compete this weekend. Johnson himself revealed the situation after receiving a message from his manager. He explained that he was simply signing posters when his manager contacted him and told him that his opponent was likely going to be replaced. The interesting part is that Johnson had already spent around 6 weeks preparing specifically for his original opponent. But as every fighter knows, the fight game can change in an instant. Johnson said his manager sent him information about the new opponent, including the proposed weight, and he was preparing to review footage before officially accepting the matchup. That is the reality of competing at the highest level. You can spend weeks preparing for one particular opponent, studying their tendencies, working on specific techniques, and building an entire game plan around their strengths and weaknesses. Then, suddenly, fight week arrives, and your opponent is gone. Instead of pulling out completely, Johnson appears to have embraced the challenge. The replacement matchup is now expected to be against Eduardo Henrique, with the fight reportedly taking place at a catchweight of 130 pounds. That means Johnson will have to make a quick adjustment and prepare for an entirely different style with very little time remaining. There is also the mental challenge. A fighter has to be able to forget about all the preparation that went into the original matchup and immediately switch their focus towards someone new. For Johnson, this is another test of adaptability. He has already made it clear that he is ready to accept the change and move forward with the fight. Now, attention turns to the new matchup against Eduardo Henrique. With the original opponent out and a replacement stepping in at the last minute, this could create a completely different fight than fans were expecting. And if Johnson can still deliver a strong performance after such a dramatic change, it could make the victory even more impressive. Move on to another news, and this time, Garry is giving his honest reaction to his recent face-off with Islam Makhachev. According to Ian, something about Islam's body language caught his attention. After standing across from him, Ian said he felt like Islam simply didn't want to be there. He explained that he sensed a little bit of nervous energy from Islam during the face-off, although Ian also admitted that these moments can be misleading. In his view, most face-offs are designed for social media, promotional content, and fulfilling obligations surrounding the event. They create dramatic images, generate attention, and give fans a moment to see the fighters standing opposite each other before the actual fight. But Ian doesn't believe that is the face-off that truly matters. For him, the real face-off comes later. Ian pointed specifically to Friday, when both fighters have successfully made weight and completed all of the difficult preparation leading into fight night. That moment, according to Ian, carries much more meaning because everything has already been done. The weight cut is finished. The training camp is over. The strategies have been prepared. There is nothing left to prove in the gym. At that point, the fighters finally stand in front of their fans, knowing that the next time they see each other, they will be inside the octagon. Ian described that final face-off as the one that matters to him. He believes the emotions and intensity are completely different when both fighters have made weight and know that there is no more preparation left. There is only the fight. So while Ian believes he noticed some nervous energy from Islam during their recent face-off, he doesn't appear to be putting too much importance on it. He understands that these promotional moments can be part of the show. The real test will come when the doors close, the cage is locked, and both fighters finally have to put everything they've worked on into action. For Ian, that is the moment that matters most, and that's where he expects the true story of this matchup to begin. Move on to another news, and this time, Joe Rogan is speaking out about UFC contracts and why he believes the current payment structure deserves a serious look. As we recently covered, Rogan has already been pushing for stricter rules surrounding eye pokes. But during his conversation with Aljo Sterling on the JRE podcast, he raised another issue that affects fighters directly: how they are paid. Rogan made it clear that he doesn't like the traditional structure where fighters receive a show purse and then an additional win bonus. His argument is simple. Fighters are already giving everything they have inside the octagon, regardless of whether a win bonus is waiting for them. And sometimes, the final result isn't completely in the fighter's control. Judges can make mistakes. Referees can make controversial calls. A fighter could perform at an extremely high level and still lose a decision. That can mean losing a significant amount of money simply because of a result that the fighter couldn't control. Rogan believes that's a major problem. He argued that fighters shouldn't have such an important part of their income, career, and ability to support their families depend on the decisions of officials who can occasionally get it wrong. His preferred system would be much simpler. Pay fighters a fixed amount for competing, regardless of the result. For example, imagine a fighter has a contract worth $20,000 to show and another $20,000 to win. Instead of risking the additional money, the UFC could potentially offer a guaranteed $30,000 for the fight. That would give the fighter more financial security before entering the cage. Of course, there is another side to the argument. UFC contracts have improved in certain areas, particularly when it comes to fighter compensation and accommodations for some injuries. But critics argue that the biggest financial gains have gone disproportionately toward the sport's biggest stars. At the same time, lower-ranked fighters generally don't generate the same level of attention or revenue, which makes the situation more complicated. Still, Rogan's central argument is understandable. A fighter can train for months, make weight, enter the octagon, and perform at the highest level, only to lose a significant portion of their expected paycheck because of a close decision. And that is exactly why Rogan believes the UFC's payment structure deserves more discussion.